Hi everyone, it's Will with a new diary entry, or rather half a new diary entry for 1906. And this particular diary entry is divided so neatly into two topics that I decided to do it in two parts. Even though if we race through it, we could certainly do it in one. All right, so Dimitri's habit these days seems to be to write every other day, but to fit the skipped day into the diary, the current one that he's writing. And so the last one was the 13th of April, which was a Thursday, and now we're at the 15th of April, which is a Saturday, 1906, of course. And to recap what happened last time, so he's getting ready for this military parade of his battalion on the 17th of April. And he's rehearsing for that. It's the first time he's going to do something that complex and that important, where he's in the public eye and he's in front of the Tsar and he's in front of the men and the officers of his battalion. So it's been rather nerve-wracking for him, but that first rehearsal went very well and he came away with a real boost in confidence. And so it seems that that these rehearsals, at least this rehearsal that he's talking about today, were not specifically for him. They were for the whole battalion. And yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's dive into it. 15th April 1906, Saturday. Today there was a scandal on my part. I was late to the rehearsal and arrived after the part where they had already put their rifles on their shoulders to start the ceremonial march, and when I saw that, my spirit fell so acutely that I performed worse than the first time. Yesterday we had tea on the balcony at that palace. The weather was wonderful, of course. Yesterday was Wait a second. Yes, that was yesterday. Yesterday was Georgy Mikhailovich's birthday. I gave him a wastepaper basket and a little kit for nail care items. Unfortunately, he didn't seem to like either gift. Today we dined at that palace, and while we were playing billiards, I asked the sovereign whether I could get a boat to take out on the small pond. Tomorrow I have a very scary event. I have to receive the officers of my battalion. They're going to present me with a badge. I have now set myself a task to fix the rails in the little garden because they're in such bad shape that it's just sad to look at them. Almost all the sleepers need to be replaced because they're rotten. Oi, damn, now I'm scared to think about tomorrow. It's so scary I can't even express it, and on top of that, I had to go and make a mistake today. Okay, so things didn't go as well on that Saturday as they had on the Thursday, unfortunately. And he loves this word scandal, which he continues to use as an adult in his later diaries. So why was he late? You would think that there would be a carriage waiting or everything would be arranged so that he would absolutely get there on time with time to spare. So he seems to be taking the blame for this himself. So maybe he was dragging his heels and doing some other activity, and they couldn't get him moving quickly enough. So this is something that's very consistent in his diaries, that his spirits rise and fall based on lots of things, based on the weather. I would say that he had, at least as an adult, that he had seasonal affective disorder, and he was very much affected by the weather. And when it was gloomy, he would talk about how depressing it was, and his spirits would fall. And in this instance, The minute he embarrasses himself a little bit by showing up late when they've already started the rehearsal, it affects him so badly that he flubs it, and he says he does worse than he actually did the very first time he attempted it. So, as I say, that was quite consistent with him. And the reason I'm saying that this was not a rehearsal that was specifically for him, of course, is because if that was the case, they would have waited for him, and they didn't. And I guess it surprises me a little bit that they didn't wait for him anyway, him being a Grand Duke, but I guess, they needed to get this done. So they went ahead and started. Okay, so this is, I think, the first time in the diaries that he refers to GM, so Georgy Mikhailovich Laming, not as GM, but using his first name and patronymic. And so it was his birthday, he was in his 40s, and I have to admit, it sounds to me like the gifts that Dmitri gave him were not very thoughtful and were a little on the on the unimpressive side, because we've seen in the past that he gives gifts to people that seem really nice. And for instance, even with Miss June, whom he doesn't like, Maria's governess, he gave her some stationery with her monogram, and he got the impression that she really liked it. And this time, a waste paper basket and a little nail kit. Yeah, maybe he could have done better. But maybe, it's hard to say if Georgy Mikhailovich really liked them or not, because Dmitri was quite sensitive. He was always looking for signs of whether people liked him or not. And he could have been oversensitive in that case, or it could be that there's this continued bit of tension between him and GM, and maybe GM wasn't the kind of person who covered up his disappointment if he didn't like the gifts he was given. I mean, it's petty, but even some adults are that way. So we'll have to leave that hanging, whether it was just Dmitri's perception or if it was Georgy Mikhailovich himself. So he's really freaked out by this event of the next day, where he has to receive the officers in a formal setting. And I guess it was because it was a formal setting, because we know that he knows all the officers of his battalion. So why would he assume that they would judge him if he didn't do it right, or whatever it is that he's afraid of? So they're going to be presenting him with a badge, and this would be a medal, not like a stitched badge that you would sew on to a uniform or something. I think it's a kind of commemorative medal thing that you could wear it, but you wouldn't necessarily. And let's see, he uses actually the French word jeton, and so maybe I haven't gotten that quite right. I should have looked up the French word. It sounds vaguely familiar, but it's not really a part of my vocabulary. So, and finally, he's given himself this new task of repairing the little railroad in the garden. Yesterday he called it the private garden. Today he's calling it the little garden, but it's where the outdoor toys were, or playground equipment that he and Maria played with when they were little. And he's particularly focused on this little railroad, which doesn't surprise me at all, because, as I said before, model railroading was a real passion of his whole life, one of the biggest, I would say. And so we'll talk about that as the diaries progress. But this is certainly an early indication that was already something that was important to him, although he hasn't talked about doing smaller scale model railroading, indoor model railroading as yet, amongst the various things that he talks about liking to do on a daily basis. But he sees this one when he and Welter go wandering into the old playground and look around, and He sees that the railroad is falling apart, and he immediately wants to fix it. And I guess I'm a little surprised that there wasn't a groundskeeper who was keeping things up so that they didn't simply become derelict or dilapidated. I mean, it'd been a while. So Grand Duke Paul had been forced to leave Russia in 1902. So it'd been 4 years since this palace had been a residence, a real residence. And I guess that the caretakers just weren't focused on things like that. And then the question is, why was Dmitri setting himself this task of repairing it? Because who was going to play with it? And so I don't know if he was thinking of his little half-brother, but I doubt it, because he doesn't seem to have had any particular affection for his little half-brother, and because he's more or less concluded at this point that his father is not going to come back to Russia, or if he does come back to Russia, he's not going to be allowed to bring his new family with him. So, maybe Dmitri had it in mind that he would play with the thing or enjoy the thing himself. And we know how he had been playing with toy soldiers with little Borya Laming, and he was a little embarrassed about that at his age, to be doing that with an 8-year-old, but he also says that he enjoyed it. So that's a thought. Maybe he was thinking that he and Borya could enjoy this little railroad, and ostensibly it could be for Borya. But I don't know why I'm speculating so much on this. It is what it is. And then before he goes into the next section of the diary, he's bothered again by this anxiety about what's going to happen tomorrow with the reception of the officers. And he's particularly anxious about it because he embarrassed himself today at the rehearsal by being late and not performing well. And that's sort of an endearing trait of his, that he doesn't approach things as, well, I'm the Grand Duke, and so I'm the important one, and so who cares what they think. It really concerns him. He's using his slightly rude language. Damn. Now I'm scared to even think about it. So, typical teenager, nothing too bad. And come back tomorrow, because we have a very, very interesting section that's focused on Maria's suddenly rather lamentable behavior, and on Dmitri's own relationship with Maria, and at his confusion about how his sister is behaving, and even embarrassment at how she is behaving. All right, so I will see you next time. Bye.